Welcome to the Show Me the Way podcast. I am your host, Andrea Miller, and I'm so excited to bring this show to you. Show Me the Way is a podcast dedicated to exploring the journeys of those who have faced adversity and found themselves on unexpected paths. We will have meaningful, thoughtful conversations about challenges we have faced and how we discovered and forged new direction. Prepare to be inspired and to uncover your own strength as you listen to relatable and motivating stories. Life has a way of twisting and turning, and we often need a fresh perspective to understand how to navigate. Let's show each other the way. In today's episode, I'm joined by Haley Kilman, a connection I'm incredibly grateful for through a referral from my former boss and friend, Eric Swanson. Haley is a poised, thoughtful, and resilient young woman who brought so much honesty and depth to our conversation. Haley shares her journey through personal adversity, including past struggles with depression. But nothing could have prepared her for the devastating loss she experienced just last December. Her live-in boyfriend, soon-to-be fiancé, was tragically killed in a cycling accident near their home after being hit by a drunk driver. As you can imagine, the grief is still very fresh, and Haley is continuing to navigate the emotional and practical realities of losing not just a partner, but the life they were building together. Despite the unimaginable weight of her loss, Haley courageously opens up in hopes of helping others feel less alone. She offers insight into the often overlooked realities that come with losing a significant other, things many of us never think about until faced with them. We also talk about the importance of community. Haley reflects on the incredible support system surrounding her and emphasizes how vital it is to nurture friendships long before you need them. She closes the episode with heartfelt advice on how to show up for someone going through grief, what helps, what doesn't, and how simply being present can make all the difference. This conversation is raw, meaningful, and deeply human, a powerful reminder that even in our darkest moments, connection and support can help guide us forward one day at a time. Welcome back to the Show Me the Way podcast. Do you ever meet someone and just immediately recognize that they're going to impact your life in a very positive way? Many moons ago, I met my friend Eric Swanson. And although he was technically my boss, he was much more of a friend to me. He understood me right away and he met me where I was at. We had great conversations. We just really got one another. Although I didn't truly love the job I held at the time, I was motivated to get up each day because I knew that I had a great working partner. Through the years, we haven't seen one another, but we've definitely kept in touch. And he's so good at thinking about me. As many of you know, I'm a realtor, so he has sent me potential referrals for that. And he just recently sent me an awesome referral for the podcast. So it's really nice to know you've got people out there that are thinking about you and that something pops into their mind and they reach out. I love that. So this guest, her name is Haley Kilman. And after a back and forth conversation, we had a voice memo text thread. She was very patient with me. I really wanted to have her on the show and she was very open to it. Eric was right. She's definitely dealt with her share of adversity. She has dealt with grief after losing her boyfriend in an accident. So she has a story to tell, and I'm so grateful that she was open to sharing it with me. Not the path that she expected to be on, but one she's willing to tell us about. And I know we're all going to learn from her. So welcome to the show, Haley. I'm so grateful that you are here. And obviously, we just kind of met online. This is the first time we're seeing each other in person. So tell me a little bit more about you that I didn't share, just to introduce you to our listeners.
Yeah, so I'm from Texas, but I live outside of Nashville now. So I met Eric because I work in automotive, and he is exactly how you described. He was a boss, but we have definitely kept in touch. I think he might be the best boss everyone has ever had. He's somebody that impacts your life for sure. But yeah, so he introduced us and he just spoke very highly of you, which was very nice and very Eric.
Thank you. Appreciate you saying that. Cool. Nashville. How do you like it there?
It's very pretty. It's much more green than Texas.
And it's probably warmer than where I am. I'm in Michigan and it's May 2nd and it's 43 degrees, I think.
Yeah,
So
it's oddly cold here, so I don't know what happened, but I'm in a long sleeve today.
cool. And so what do you do for a living now?
So I work for for an OEM. So I'm the liaison between dealerships and the manufacturer.
Okay, cool. Good for you. Do you have to go into an office or do you work at home?
Our office is in a different state, but we usually go about once a month.
Okay.
And then I go to the dealerships. So they call it field.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Well, yeah, I again always appreciate a referral. I think I told you before we hopped on that I have a 16-year-old son with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. He's full time in a wheelchair, and he is the reason I started this podcast. First of all, I'm sure you can tell, and you could tell by my voice memos that I like to talk. So I always thought, oh, I should do a podcast. I like to listen to podcasts. So I thought, I'm just going to share his story and our family's journey because before this, you're younger than me, but you probably can relate that we often don't really think we're going to deal with that much adversity. We think, oh, we're just going to go to college, go get our job, things are just going to keep moving along. I didn't really feel like I dealt with that much adversity when I was younger. Or I've often said on this show that perhaps people didn't talk about it as much. I mean, maybe my parents dealt with a lot more than I understood, but I just kept going along. I met my husband in college and just everything seemed like it was just going along the way that I thought was planned. I have an older son. When he was born, everything was fine. There wasn't any health concerns. And then I really wanted to have another child. My husband's an only child. So I was like, we are having another kid. Nothing wrong with only children, but I really wanted him to have a sibling because that's what I was used to. And my husband agreed. And so we had another child. My older son was 3 when we had him. And again, everything seemed fine. The pregnancy was fine. When he was born, there were no health issues that we knew of. And everything was going along according to plan. And then when he was 5 years old, he was diagnosed with this condition. And I had never heard of it before. It is genetic. I found out that I was a carrier, and 50% of the time, if I had a boy, 50% chance that they were going to have muscular dystrophy.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so it was not anything that I really prepared for. And I mean, geez, he's 16. So 11 years later, every day he teaches me something, and every day he teaches my older son and my husband something. There's so much perspective. I've learned that I can't live like 3, 4, 5 weeks in advance. I need to think about today and tomorrow. That's about as far as I go because you just never know what tomorrow brings. I know you can relate to that as well. And I just believe that there's so much you can learn about dealing with adversity, and it's the perspective that you gain and how you react to it that really shows, like, not that these things happen for a reason. Actually, my son was a podcast guest just last week, and he talked about maybe things do happen for reasons sometimes, and sometimes we don't understand them, but sometimes they really do give us a different understanding of life. And so sometimes we do have to pivot. Sometimes we do have to turn left instead of right. And so I wanted to share his story. And then since then, I've had all kinds of guests share everything. We have had a few people talk about grief. We've heard them talk about the loss of family members, or we've heard them talk about medical diagnoses, but there's also been like, oh, I switched jobs, or oh, I went to get a different degree than I had planned on. So there's always times in our life where we turn left instead of right. And it's just allowing people to share those stories, even though sometimes they're difficult. But I think it's important to share. And I think there's other people out there that can learn from it. So even if one person is impacted by what you share and you can get them to see things more clearly or to understand that they're not alone, then I think it's worth it for me to do this. So it's awesome that you're here. I really appreciate it. I know it's not an easy story to share. Sometimes people will just talk about life in general, but I know in your situation, we're kind of focused on something that happened specifically, but really there's no script. So I'm going to stop talking, I promise, and I'm going to turn the mic to you and just allow you to share your story similar to how you shared it with me. And I will just ask questions as they come up. But yeah, I'm anxious to understand more details about it and how things are going now. So I'm going to let you speak.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So you talk about your son. So my biological dad actually has ankylosing spondylitis. Have you heard of that?
No, I have not.
Um, it's like the best way I can describe it is like a really extreme form of arthritis, and the magnitude of it really varies on the person. It is hereditary, but we don't really know where his came from. So he's always had that, where at this point he walks kind of like a mummy, so very stiff. And then what was it? It was the year before he was born. He was actually hit by a drunk driver and had to be care flighted out. So add the growing AS on top of having bolts from his neck down to the bottom of his spine. So you can imagine the way he walks. So he's had that my entire life. But yeah, there's so many different types of I want to call it disease. I don't know what it would necessarily be
Yeah,
called, but yeah,
yeah, conditions or
yeah,
yeah.
condition.
It is crazy because you hear about so many sometimes it's, a disease that we've all heard of, but there's so many that have if you haven't dealt with it, you've never heard of it, you don't know what it means. And sometimes I'll say like it's crazy that people are born healthy or without these conditions because everything has to be perfect. So it's so interesting. There's so many things that people deal with. And I think a lot of people deal with things quietly or they keep it to themselves or they don't want to share because I don't know, maybe they don't want to be the center of attention. But it's like the more we share and the more we hear from people, it's like, okay, we're not alone. People are all going through something. Or hopefully it gives people a little bit more of empathy where they look at someone and they say, okay, I'm not going to judge you until I know what you're going through. So, wow, there's always
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So you also made a comment about, like if something happens and you think, okay, it's gonna get better. Um, so I always try to look back at like where everything started, right? And I was talking to a good friend of mine about it, and she kept saying, she goes, "You've been through a lot," and I always was like, "No, it's not the worst thing. Like worse things could happen to people, which I've learned as a trauma response, where you're comparing your experience to something way worse to try to kind of maybe not invalidate, but kind of invalidate what you've been through to
Mhm.
be like, it could be worse, right?
Right.
Um, so with everything that happened, so my boyfriend's name is Blaze. With everything happened with him, I've gone back and just looked at the trajectory of things, right? So with my dad, I think back in what was it, 93? So back then they really, especially in Texas, weed wasn't really a thing, right? So he coped with the pain of everything, especially with AS at the time. I think it's more talked about now than it was at the time. But he didn't really know anything about it. They were still trying to do chiropractic treatments, which is definitely not what you should do with that. Different forms of medication, right? So he self medicated with alcohol. So he went through phases of, alcoholism and everything. And then when I was 5, my parents had a sibling for me. So her name was Caitlin. And then she died from SIDS. So that really impacted everything for both my parents, right? So they went down kind of different spirals in life and then they ended up separating. And some people talk about their families divorcing. It was a good thing for us. And I got a really great stepdad out of it. But they both coped in different ways, right? But I remember at the time thinking that that was the worst thing that could happen, even when I was younger. And again, I think that's something that we always tell ourselves is it could get worse. It could be worse. Somebody's struggles are worse, but that doesn't really invalidate what you're feeling, regardless of the age, right? Um, so him being disabled, and then neither of my parents finished college. So once I went through school and had different family dynamic issues, right? I was lucky to where I at least got FAFSA and the Pell Grant to help pay for school. And I kept thinking, okay, this would be so much nicer if life had been easier. Because I think if anybody that's had to go to college full time and then work full time, like it's not easy, right? And even then, you're thinking, okay, this sucks, but if I can just make it through, then we'll be good. But like for me, I was able to push through, and then my depression didn't really hit until senior year, and then you kind of see that in my grades, where it's just all of a sudden I'm failing, but you don't really understand it, you don't know why. Um, so I'm just trying to like hit a trajectory with that one. Finally made it through, did all the things right, got the job. Actually, that's how I got an automotive. I applied at a dealership. They were hiring a marketing person, which ended up working out really well for me. Just applied on a whim. But yeah, so I'm lucky that I got to meet on my dad's side my grandparents. I knew both of my grandparents and then my great grandparents, and they actually lived for a long time. My great grandma didn't pass away until 2019, which is pretty crazy. She was living on, right? She said that old folks' homes were for old people, so she lived by herself until I think the last year and a half. Yeah, it's impressive. But we had some health stuff with my grandpa, and we didn't know if it was dementia. We didn't know what that was, but he was having anger outbursts. It was a whole thing. And for me, that was actually the hardest thing that had happened because they were in a different state. He was this very independent person. He was a sheriff, retired sheriff, where he was from. And again, nobody knew how to deal with it. There's different dynamics in the family, right? And so when he did end up passing, it was a pretty traumatic way. And I think a lot of people can relate to that because you hear the stories of, old people tripping and they fall and they hit their head. And there's all these things. Like, it's not always the nicest way to go. So at the time, that was during COVID and everything's happening. So insert depression, right? And you still think, okay, this is pretty bad, but it's got to get better. So, and at this point, I had moved to Chicago actually for work, which was cool. I ended up moving back to Texas at some point during COVID, just to be closer to family and everything. But that's when I finally started kind of looking at it of like, okay, what is depression? Why do I have it? Why do I feel this way? Because it's these up and down spirals, and you think that you can push your way through it. And sometimes you can, but for me, it was like a lifelong thing where the trauma is just in your body, and then it just kicks in at random times. And so I moved around a lot for work and kept thinking like, okay, I've put in the work, I've done it. I really actively want to meet somebody. So uh, dated pretty aggressively. Like, I would say yes to any date for about a year. And that was the goal. It's like, I'm just going to do it. Right. And eventually I got fun. And I ended up meeting Blaze through Hinge. And he was only I moved to North Carolina from Texas. He was only my second date. We got to talk for a month because he was out of town for a cycling event. He was always cycling. He was a competitive, avid cyclist. And there's this thing called Summerfest up in Wisconsin. It's a bunch of different artists that come through. And then there's a cycling event at the same time called American Dairyland. Yeah, so he would go up with his second family. We call him his adopted family. It's his best friend's family. And they went every June. So we were chatting the whole time. And once he got back, we basically moved in together like right away. I still had my apartment for a little bit, but never got rid of him. He was always there. And it helps because he was remote.
And this was in North Carolina, you're saying?
Yeah, this is
Yeah,
North
okay.
Carolina.
Okay.
So yeah, I'd say it happened like really quick. How everybody says, oh, well, you know. I don't even know if it was like okay, we're for sure getting married, but it's like, all right, we're both on the same page. This is what we want. And we're both pretty relaxed about, marriage and all the other stuff. It's like, let's just figure it out, right? So he actually suffered from his own type of like depression and spirals and stuff. And so that affected the relationship, but we actively worked on it. And I had gotten both of ours kind of under control because you get two people with that and then you realize that certain things set both of you off because you just don't know. And we had never lived with somebody either. So that was different. But we moved together to Tennessee for a job of mine. And we actually really liked it here. I could live anywhere for the most part, give or take a few states, but he was like, I really like it here. The cycling's great. It's beautiful. He's like, I finally got my life under control. This is great. We ended up adopting two puppies. And they're really cute.
I was going to ask if you had fur babies.
We do. Yeah, we got two sisters in October. So they're about 9 months old right now. They're very cute. But yeah, so like we had everything kind of like figured out. And the plan actually was this month. We didn't have the dates yet, but sometime this month, either next week or the week after, we would have been in Italy. And that's where we were going to get engaged. So, and that was right around our 3-year mark, right? So again, you think like, okay, you've made it through, life is good. You can finally relax because the balls finally stopped dropping. And then the week, what was it, the week of December 8th, that's a Monday, I left for a work trip in Savannah. And we go every year. It's like a Christmas thing. And originally he had thought about going with me, but he can't, we get company cars, so he can't drive it. And we decided if he was going to come, he'd have to fly, and he didn't feel like flying. And his sister and mom were going to be there. So his sister lives there and his mom was coming. So we were talking about doing like a little Christmas there. But he said, no, I want to stay back. And then a few days later, December 10th, he told me he was going to go out on a bike ride that night. And it varies, right? The time you go. And he was like, it'll be a little bit quieter. And decided to do about an hour-long bike ride. And he was almost done. He was at like the tail end of it. So if you're on the street and then you can either go straight or take like a curve, right? You take that curve and then you do one more right, and then you're at our house or like our neighborhood. And there was a person, I don't want to call him a man, because he's not, but he decided to drink and drive. And the cops tried to pull him over, and he decided he didn't want a second DUI. And he was going, estimate is about 90, and the road is a 35. And he smashed right into him and basically died like right on impact. And so what's odd is he has all the stuff on his bike, right? So none of us got the crash alert. I think it's because it happened so fast that that's just my best guess, is maybe it broke. I don't know. But there was no crash alert. And I'm an hour ahead, so I had already gone to sleep. And he normally has a wristband. And for some reason that night he had taken it off, and he never takes that thing off. And he didn't have his license on him. So even though our neighborhood was right there, everything happened so fast that he went in as a John Doe. And the next morning when I woke up, he had it. I texted him. He didn't text back. Gave it a little time. Tried calling him. He didn't answer. And then I looked at, this is where technology comes in handy for anyone who's like, I don't want them watching me. No, you need to have it. So I looked at the garage and saw what time he left, but that he never came back. So, I was like, that's not a good sign. There's only two ways in and out, and he doesn't go through the front door with a bike. So then he has a Garmin tracker. So I looked at that, and there was a weird zigzag thing in like an area that he wouldn't have been in, especially at night. It's called Antioch. So it's like a way up there. If you're doing a loop, you wouldn't also go up. So my coworkers and I were looking at it thinking like, okay, why would he go up that way? That doesn't make sense. And like, did he hit a possum? Like, what is this, right? And one of my dealerships is actually right by it. So I called the GM and asked if he could send somebody to that area just to look around and see if there was anything weird. What we realized later was that wasn't him. That was the cops with the bike. So it was still tracking. And because we were like, okay, well, that's a good sign if there's a police station, right? If whatever. But we didn't realize that it was like the processing, the zigzag part, right? So we're trying to call places, and we're all trying to call hospitals. I had dinner with his sister the night before, so I tried to call her, and I let her know, I'm like, have you heard from him? And then she puts me and her brother in a group chat, and I sent him the screenshot of the Garmin because I get an email with all of it, and we're looking at it, trying to figure that out. And end up like getting a flight back. But unfortunately, Savannah and Nashville don't have the best flight options. So I had a layover, which took forever. And we're still trying to figure out like what's going on, right? One of my coworkers finally gets a hold of one of the police departments, which, side note, was really difficult to get a hold of. You think that you can just call 911 and they might be able to transfer you, and that was not the case. They kept sending us to the wrong places. So he finally gets a hold of somebody, and they say, yeah, we have Blaze's phone, but we don't know why. That's at least how it was conveyed to me, which didn't make any sense. Like, why would you have the phone, but you don't know why, right? And the guys kept trying to say, like, maybe he got arrested. I'm like, he wouldn't get arrested. He doesn't drink. Why would he get arrested? That doesn't make any sense. So, in the back of your mind, but you have to check the boxes. So I had my neighbor go into the house and check, and the dogs were in there with their harnesses on. And Blaze had kept the harness, like he had sent me a photo the night before of the puppies with the harnesses. So I know he was planning on coming back to take them out before he went to bed. And so they had the harnesses. He looked through the house. He wasn't there. So, checkbox number 5 or whatever it is. And then at some point, I let Blaze's stepdad know that something was weird, something's off. and he asked me if I should let the dad know to come. And so my coworker is helping me make decisions at this point because I'm like, I have no idea what to do. So he's like, yes, tell him yes. So I tell him, I'm like, yep, get him on a plane, tell him to come out. We don't know what's going on. And at some point, my coworker, when we're driving, gets a call and they tell him that they have somebody that matches his description, but that they can't identify him because we weren't married. And I tried to call a different place before that and, told him what he would look like. And the whole time I thought he had the black wristband. So we're trying to figure out, like, why wouldn't they call anybody on the wristband, right? Um, so my coworker later told me that it was a chaplain officer that called him, but he didn't want to tell me at that moment. So I'm talking to his dad, and we're at the airport waiting. My coworker flew back with me, which was really nice. And so he lets us know that he was able to confirm that it was him. So we get back, and then the next day, the dad and the brother get there. And then my friend actually flew in from Texas that same night. She met me at the airport when I landed back from Savannah. And we all go and deal with the police and talk to them. And I think the weirdest, well, not the weirdest part, but one of the weird parts too is the cop said they had me down as a roommate. And I still to this day don't know why they had me down as a roommate. So he gives us the details that they can give us. And there wasn't really much else to that one. So then we had to wait. It was a Thursday. And then his mom and sister got there Saturday morning. We had to go to the funeral home, do all the things. And it felt like forever. It didn't feel like it was just a couple of days. Like when people ask me how long they were there, I said it was like 7 to 8 days. And then I realized that his mom and sister were only there for Saturday morning through Monday morning. But it felt like such a long time. But yeah, so the whole thing happened. So luckily, the guy that was driving had somebody in the car. He took off. We're still trying to find him. And she identified him. But it took, so this happened December 10th. We didn't know what the guy's name was or what he looked like until I was at my neighbor's house for New Year's Eve and we see him on the news. So the cops didn't give us a heads up ahead of time either, which is pretty wild. You would think
That
it
they were
was
gonna
like,
put him like, they found him and they were gonna do a story on it on the news. Wow. Yeah, you would think you would know.
yeah, you would think that they would give the family a heads up, but they do not do that. Apparently, it's not a requirement. So, and the family doesn't live here. We live here, but they're all spread out in different states. So I called his dad and let him know. I'm like, oh, there he is. And then I look online and they had published it like 9 hours before.
Oh
Yeah.
my
So there's like
gosh.
delayed information the whole time, which is pretty insane.
So, did he get arrested? Is he in jail? Do you know his
No, he's
status
still out
now?
there.
Okay, wow. They just
Yeah.
identified him and were able to say this is him. Oh my gosh. Oh, okay. This was and yeah, I know that when we spoke, I was surprised at how recent. So you're still in the thick of all of this. It's not like it was 10 years ago. Not that that makes it any easier, but it's all very fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you still live in the same place that you shared with him?
Yeah, so the people here are really nice. They let me extend it because I was supposed to, or at least was supposed to end early May, and I hadn't decided like, am I going to stay? Am I not? What's it going to look like? And we weren't married, so Blaze's family still needed to get stuff, and I packed up a decent amount of things as friends came to visit. I was lucky that from day one I had people visiting through like mid February and onward pretty consistently, so they helped with different things, but there's just like a lot to go through, right? So I'm still trying to figure that out. Like, do I want to stay or move? So
And the other
yeah,
interesting thing is the status as roommate. I mean, obviously, we're so much more than that. I wonder, I don't think people think about that. As I'm listening to you, it's like, gosh, the things that we don't think about. Not that you can plan for everything. I mean, you're not sitting there thinking, okay, I'm dating this avid competitive cyclist. He could get in a cyclist accident at any time. That's not going through your mind. So, I mean, just you could be that kind of person that's like doomsday, but hopefully you're not. Most people aren't like that. But planning, like, I wonder, how do you avoid that? Like, if you're an emergency contact, does that up your status? I don't know. Like, it's too bad that the person that's probably the closest to him is just called a roommate.
Yeah, I remember my jaw dropped and I looked at the cop and I said, who called me that?" He goes, "Oh, it's fixed now." No, actually, so Blaze actually had his phone on him and somehow it didn't even crack, which is pretty insane. But he had the thing, you know how you can double click your phone and you can actually set up an emergency contact. So you can double click it and it calls 911, but you can also set it up to have the emergency people. The cops didn't look at that. And apparently that is something that law enforcement is careful about, that they can do that, but maybe it's like the education on it. I'm not fully sure, but it turns into this legal concern of like, can we go through the phone even though you're not, right? So I would say that if people have that, throw that idea out the window because it's really not beneficial to you. It might be, but in my case, it wasn't. And when I've asked around, it seems like it's just not something that people think about. And like I said, the hesitation with legal and going through people's stuff. So now, even if I go and take the dogs out, I have my, what do they call them? The bag that goes over your shoulder and it has my license in it. So you should always have your license on you. He used to joke, he'd be like, "All right, bye babe, I'm going on a bike ride. Hope I don't die." Because he was aware that it's a thing, right? But you don't think that it's going to be something like that. There's a lot of aggression towards people cycling. So he's had people try to run him off the road. He's had people throw things at him. It's a thing.
Really?
Oh
Wow.
yeah, it's a thing. But like if I could go back, we were so chill about having everything set up, just in general, right? And we kept saying like, "Oh, we'll sit down, we'll do the paperwork, we'll do all the things. We should do that now." And we have a shutdown at the end of December. I was like, "All right, when I get back from Savannah, let's finally do it. I won't be going anywhere for a week. We can finally get that taken care of." So he didn't have a will. I have one now, but and we didn't have a lot of stuff set up. So there's a lot of things that I learned too. Like he had I can't remember what bank it was, but he had a bank where you can set up as many savings accounts as you want, right? And you can label them. So you think you're being organized and you're like travel, baby fund, car fund, whatever you want. But he didn't have a beneficiary for each one, and there were a lot of them. So that has to become a probate thing for his family. Um, I changed banks after that because the bank I used for my savings, you had to call to change who your beneficiary was. So I canceled that and have one where I can do it online. And he had two homes in North Carolina, so those are part of probate. And most of it, to that extent, is simple. The problem his dad has been with some of the banks, right? I mean, my suggestion to anybody is like have a trust because that bypasses probate in most cases. And you think that sounds extreme because you're like, well, I'm not from this wealthy family. But even if you have a will that has to go through probate and that costs people money, right? You learn about like upon death with bank accounts, which is I had no idea about. The car. Like his car is super old and it's not like it's worth an insane amount of money, but he's the only one on the title. So that becomes part of probate. And I mean, he died in December. Everything was kind of closed at that point. So his dad didn't get to start really actively doing any of it until like January, February. We're just now allowed to sell the car.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what is your relationship like with the family? Sounds like maybe you're closer to his dad?
Yeah. And it's funny because I'd only met his dad a couple times before this. He was always nice, but he worked in higher education. He just recently retired. And so kind of like me, I say that automotive moves you around like the military. Like they moved around a lot for his stuff. And again, everybody's in different states. Like Blaze had only met my parents a couple times too. Um, but yeah, so we had kind of decided, all right, like he's not super tech savvy and he's very open about that. So I was like, let me help you. So went through like Blaze's apps, tried to get into different bank accounts. So he at least knew who he should be reaching out to, right? So we tag team that. And I will say, like, even with two people, that was a full-time job. I took FMLA through the beginning of March, and I don't know how people do it without taking time off, especially if you're doing it solely by yourself. But it's crazy. And when you're like in a cloud of fog, like a big
Yeah, like a
fog.
fog.
Yeah.
I don't mean to make this like a business transaction, but just listening to you talk, it's really making me think like if people go through something like this, what are some things that they can learn from? So I appreciate you sharing in that regard, like some things that you learned. So it's just making me think like, wow, you just don't think about all of these things and you're young. You think, oh, I don't need a will or a trust. Most people don't think they need those things when they're young or they don't have kids. But you're right. You have a life and you have material possessions and you've got things and there are people that are going to have to deal with some of that if something happens to you. So very good advice.
Yeah, I think my biggest advice is if you are thinking about living with somebody, there needs to be paperwork discussed and done ahead of time. And um, not even like you're not even getting married. So, like, not even a prenup, but in terms of protecting each other. Or, like, if I had moved into his house, I would have never, I mean, I moved in for a little bit before we moved, right? But if this had happened while I was living somewhere that he owned, it really is up to whoever inherits his stuff, right? Which in the state of Tennessee, it goes to the parents first, and then let's say they have already passed, then it would go to siblings. If you have a kid, it goes straight to the kid, bypasses everything. But it would be up to them on if you could continue living there, unless you have like a roommate lease. So if which is a weird thing to think about, but nobody really think I would have never thought about that. And we're joint tenants on this place, but even with that, you have to really. It depends on your relationship with the family, or at least their relationship with the family, right? Of how dirty can it get? So I think there's a lot of self awareness with that too. Of okay, how well do I know my family? What would their actions look like? Like for me, I have a little brother who just turned 18, and he's actually autistic, right? So there are certain things that I would want to be left to him. And so all of my stuff is now set up to go to my best friend. So everybody has suggested to me that if you have things that you want to go to somebody his age, right, and not just to your parents, to have a third party. And that way, obviously, she would be sad if I died, but it takes the emotion out of it with the parents. And not that I don't trust my parents, but like it's a lot better to have that third party
Yeah,
managing
I
it.
get that. Yeah, I understand that for sure. And I like the one word you said was protection. Because again, you're just really stirring a lot in my mind. As I said, I'm a realtor and I sell houses. Just last summer, I sold a house to a couple that wasn't married. Now, granted, both their names are on the title, but they're young. They're thinking, oh, this is going to be great. But it's good for me to kind of hear this from you because it's something I could say like you might want to put some things in place or write some things down or make sure your beneficiaries are correct or again their names are both on the title so that's good but yeah it's just things that you don't think about. I think it's another reason I wanted to talk about people going through adversity or going through shifts in their plan because there's just so much we don't think about or we just oh it's never going to happen to us so I don't have to worry about these things. So you're really kind of educating us.
Yeah. And again, state laws too. Most states don't protect you if you're not married. And I think a lot of people our age are more chill about it, where they're like, oh, we don't need to be married. The government doesn't need to be involved. But even if you're not going to get married, there still needs to be a lot of paperwork done to make sure that you are treated as though you are married. The biggest one, aside from the will, actually, the biggest number one document that nobody talks about that I would have never thought about was the power of attorney. So the hospital that they took Blaze to, I hadn't even thought about it when we were calling places. It had just finished getting built 2 weeks before, so it wasn't top of mind. But you can't get any information if you're not married. And Blaze had a very strong personality, and I've told many people that if this had been reversed and someone had the audacity to tell him,
They would
no,
get an earful, right?
he would have flipped out. He'd be calling my mom and be like, tell them.
Don't
There's
they know who
no,
I am?
yeah, there's no way he'd be spiraling.
Aw.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't want to bring up like a difficult emotion or anything, but like, what are things like now? I mean, I feel like you're kind of in this interesting stage, having this relationship, and then okay, this horrible, unimaginable thing happens, and you have to deal with all the, like you said, checking the boxes. But what is your emotional state now, if you don't mind me asking?
I'd say it's definitely better than it was because in the beginning, again, I was very lucky that I had so many friends visiting. And when they realized it, they all put each other in a group chat and they're like, okay, do we send her mom or who do we send? And there's one specific friend who is the crisis friend. And
I
they
like
all, yeah, she can handle, everything. Type
I
A,
like that. I am not
yeah,
one of those people. I need a crisis friend. Anyway, go
yeah.
ahead.
She's the one who landed like right when I did at the airport, and more flexibility. My mom does not have the flexibility necessarily with work and stuff, so they decided who was coming and when, which was great because it took me out of it, right? But it one, I was drinking a lot because it's like, well, you're sad, so people came and I'm like, all right, we took one thing of trash out. I am exhausted, which was wild to even say, but I was like, I'm drained now. Let's drink and watch TV. And they were all down for that. Like a mini vacation for them. But in between that, we were like making flyers and going to all these places trying to find anybody who knew the guy and recognized him. And like prior to this, I would say like I was such a private person and made, especially with work, right? But all my stuff became not private and it was solely about Blaze and what happened. And locally, just trying to get information out there because there were people within our neighborhood that didn't even know that it happened. And it happened right there. So that, I think that preoccupied a lot of time, plus spiraling. Um, I think we joke about like, oh, I'm spiraling because of this, but like truly spiraling. Yeah, yeah, truly spiraling. Um, but having that time off to really focus on that and everything else helped. But once I got back into the work, having the routine has helped as well. Um, Mostly just like I drive a lot, so that's all you think about during the drive. But then there's at least some hours in between where you're distracted for a little bit. Um, so like that's helped. I tell everybody that once you get back into it, the routine helps. But I also needed that time off to just slowly spiral.
Yeah, I mean, spirals, I don't want to say a good word, but it's a good description of it. And again, I always tell my guests I am not trying to compare what I've been through to what you have been through, but I completely understand that you're thinking of all of these future things like, oh my gosh, what does this look like, what does that look like, and you just get all these thoughts and you just get deeper and deeper into a spiral, and it's really hard to get out of it. So I can definitely relate to that. So I think that's a great way of describing it.
Yeah. Well, and like the routine, right? So he was remote, we had the puppies, we had our routines, and then everything's just out the window. So that was an adjustment too. And then uh he was like a chatty Cathy, right? So the house was never quiet, and then all of a sudden it's super quiet. And you're also having to deal with different dynamics and realizing like, oh, okay, are people just going to come into my house and like take everything? What does that look like, right? What are your rights with that? And you just don't know. And then you're, again, I think the part that made it harder too was the unknown of, okay, this person's out there somewhere, probably nearby, we don't know, you would assume. So that part was out there too, because like every time you go and you're looking around, you're like, where is he? And so yeah, there's a lot with that, but there's still a lot of unknown. I'd say that this the spiraling definitely has died down, which is good. But medication helps too.
I mean, you need to do what you need to do. And you said, okay, I took the garbage out and I was exhausted, but it's also,
Yeah.
there's so much to be said about being mentally exhausted. Like all the things that are constantly running in your head, like even if you're not running a marathon, you've got all these running thoughts in your head, and that is extremely exhausting as well,
Yeah,
for
that's what
sure.
it was, and so my friend came, and then the whole family was here, so, like, it's, like, 2 days after everything happened, and you're still not even you haven't even processed it. I don't think any of us had processed it, but then all of a sudden, there's all these people, and there's all of this stuff that everybody has to take care of, and you're trying to figure out what you're supposed to be taking care of, and then you're also going to the funeral home, and there's high emotions, right? So, that was exhausting, I think, for everybody, and just it's an unknown. It's not something you'd normally do, right? And we had just had some of his family here for Thanksgiving, which was really fun. And so it was kind of a weird thing of how different that was, right? Like such a different reason for everybody to be together. So yeah. I think the biggest part too is like the guys out there because there's not a whole lot of time to really focus on a lot of the other stuff. And then like the memorials are a little delayed. So like the first one's this month and there's another one next month. So they were pretty pushed out comparatively speaking to like when he died. And I think a lot of people do it a little sooner, but the memorials are in the Midwest, so weather.
When you say the memorials, or is this like in place
He
of a
was
funeral?
cremated.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's having these ceremonies. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
if the body's cremated, you can obviously do it much later, but you're gonna have more than one of them?
Yeah, there's two of them. So there's one in Iowa where he went to high school and college. Like he loved that school. He played soccer there. He like donated to it. Like he loved that soccer team. And then Chicago is where both sets of his family are from. So his parents moved out, but the majority of both parents, siblings, so like his aunts and uncles, cousins, they're all there for the most part. So there's
Okay.
a second one for that.
Okay. I mean, not that there's ever a good time for a memorial, but sometimes maybe not having to do it right away does allow for a little more processing time, and maybe you can compartmentalize, maybe you can have better thoughts about it to share. I don't know. I don't know what the best plan is. And like you said, mentally exhausting, like all the decisions you have to make right away. It's just like I said, unimaginable to have to do all of this and not in your plans, that's for sure.
Yeah. Somebody told me that they wish everybody it was like a requirement to do it a year after somebody passed away because then people have had time to kind of mellow
Yeah.
down a bit. Which at first I was like, that's so far out. But now, I mean, it's 5, 6 months out. So it's not that different. But yeah, I do think that there is something to that because I think we all would have just been like spinning in circles if we had done it in January.
So I definitely want to be conscious of your time, but there's a couple other things that I wanted you to touch on. One is you've said a few things about Blaze, but I would love to hear you just give us a little bit more on him. I don't know, happy memories or things that you really think about most when you think about him.
Yeah, he was goofy. So again, like my friends always said they're like you've met your match and it was entertaining for them because we're both very hard-headed people. And so one of my really good friends, Marianne, we went out to Colorado. I think it was not last May, but yeah, it was last May for her birthday. And we went like whitewater rafting. We were all hanging out. And she said she was just watching us like poke at each other, right? And she was like, at first, I thought that you guys were bickering in a weird way. And she's like, but then I realized that you both liked it. And she was like, and it made me so happy because you finally met your match.
I love that.
So like we talked through everything, right? And that's something I really liked about him is we would go down the rabbit holes and just talk through every single thing. And that made it really nice. Um, but something my stepdad and I did when I was younger is like we would like hide around the house and try to scare each other. And Blaze and I did that.
That's really cute.
It was impossible once we had the puppies because they would tell on you. But yeah, it was just like fun. And like he had his stuff and we were both very independent. So it worked out because I travel a lot for work. So he enjoyed having that time during the week where he could go and do these psychotic, like 100-mile rides and not be cognizant of the time. So yeah,
Mm.
I just felt like the dynamic was really nice. And like I could go on my girls' trips, he'd go on his cycling trips with his really good friends. And he was supposed to be on one right now in Mallorca. So he went with his best friend's family, so the second family last year, and they decided to do it again this year. And then he had unlimited PTO, so it was easier for him, and he was remote. And so I just can't take as much time off. So I was going to meet him in Italy after that to tack it on. But yeah, like it was just like a really good dynamic. And like I said, every relationship you have to work through stuff, right? So it's not like it was like, oh, I met my soulmate and it was so easy because that's
Yeah,
not
it's
life.
rainbows and butterflies,
Yeah.
right? Exactly.
Yeah. But I think the openness to just be able to like communicate and work through stuff and like I never felt like, okay, we're having this fight and he's gonna leave. And I think we both really liked that because I feel like that's the hesitation when you're dating of, okay, is this gonna be the thing? Yeah. So that's a weird feeling too, is like having somebody that you know is there for you no matter what, and that's your person. And then the aggressive reality punching you in the face of like, oh, that's not recognized in the way that we felt like it was recognized.
Right. Well, I think, and I said this at the beginning, we say everything happens for a reason. When my son was diagnosed, I had a really hard time with that topic. And sometimes people just say that. They don't really know what they're saying, or they just feel like it's going to make you feel better. But I've come to understand over the last 11 years that maybe not a reason we understand, but there's definitely reasons to be had, or reasons that come out of things that happen. And it does sound like, just listening to you talk about him, you did learn some things from each other. So if you could say what you learned from him in your relationship that could help you as you continue to navigate life, what would that be?
Yeah, so we both came into it with like our own mental health stuff, right? And there were things where we both realized, oh, okay, this bothers us, but it's not you, it's stuff that I've brought into it. So we both actively, like, we did couples therapy, and we both did our individual therapy, and then we would get together and talk about stuff separately. So I think just the self-awareness of things that, like, I thought that I had worked through everything, and having to look at myself and be like, okay, this is a me thing, this is not a you thing, but also trying to be more gentle with things because we were both, I don't want to say abrasive, but like very blunt of just in life in general, like the Italian way. I'll call it the Italian way. But maybe, yeah, just maybe being a little bit softer with things because it is somebody else, and we both had to work on that because I wouldn't say that we're necessarily soft people.
I totally understand that, but my dad's 100% Italian too, so I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I keep saying, "Oh, you're young. You're younger than me," but really, you seem so poised and so, well, you have such a good head on your shoulders, just from, obviously don't know you that well, but just listening to you talk, like how just straightforward you were telling us this very difficult story. So I appreciate that so much. And I don't know if you believe it, but you've taught me so much in such a short period of time. And I'm sure to my listeners too, just things that you should put in place to protect yourself. That's a big word I wrote down a couple times. I love that you just said self-awareness. I think going through adversity, going through these difficult times, that's certainly a lesson. And I think it's so fresh right now. It's not like I can say, okay, tell me all your perspective after going through this. So I really appreciated you just giving us these little, one of my guests said, leave nuggets with people. And you're giving us these little nuggets of information and things that have come to your mind after going through such a difficult time. But just one more thing before we end off, I really liked how you talked about your people. First, obviously, Blaze was your person. That's when you were talking about him. It reminds me of my husband. He's my person. It's a beautiful thing to have someone like that in your life. May we all experience that unfortunately for you, a short period of time. Maybe there's more people like that for you in your future, but it's nice to have that. But also just hearing you talk about your group of friends and your crisis friend. And it sounds like you're all over the place. You don't all live right next door to one another and you can count on each other. And that's a huge part of my podcast too. Like we talk about dealing with adversity, but who is that village? Who is that tribe? And even without being prompted, people always say, this is the person I counted on. I just think we're meant to be around people. Me, I need hundreds of people. Some people are not as much of an extrovert as me and can just use one or two and they're good. But I just really wanted to honor that you had those friends and hopefully you feel like you still have people you can count on as you continue to navigate all of this.
Yeah, it's hard to say like, oh, I'm lucky because I think we've all put the work into those friendships, right? And I've talked to other widows around my age, which has been very helpful. And I think there's, a few bullet points to think about too. Like, I think we're all really hard on ourselves. And at first, I wasn't sure, okay, what do you call yourself? Because it's this gray area. And you don't want to be disrespectful towards people, but it's okay to call yourself a widow just because you're not legally one. Um, I think that it doesn't really matter people's opinion on it, but that would also discredit so many like gay relationships prior to marriage, right? Or situations where maybe you just couldn't do it. So try to think of other perspectives, right? Like where was the relationship emotionally? What were the plans? Where were you at? And it all comes down to, do you consider yourself one, right? So I've met other people who they say, I don't really consider myself that. It's something different. Either way, it's okay. It just depends on what makes you feel okay. And screw other people's thoughts on it.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's you taking care of you, and it goes back to the self-awareness thing. Well, I think you could continue to teach me as you continue to talk, but I definitely want to be respectful of your time. I just first of all appreciate you so much for not knowing me, not knowing my podcast, but being open. I think it's because of what we said about Eric. He's such a great guy, and connecting both of us just made us immediately say, okay, we can trust one another. We've got this connection. So I really appreciate you sharing the story. It's so fresh. It just happened, so it means a lot that you felt good about sharing it with all of us, sharing it with me. It's truly, truly the unexpected. Your story is exactly what I'm trying to share on this podcast. But before I completely say goodbye, let you go, is there anything else you would like to say to our listeners?
Yeah, there's so much where you just look at it and you think, oh man, if I could have done this or what if. And I think, you know, spirals aside, because that was just like the emotional part of it. But I know that other people have a hard time with fixating on the what ifs. And so like, because of everything that's happened in the past, like I've done grief therapy in the past, I've done different trauma therapies. So there are different tools that I already had to not necessarily process this type of it, but just to know, like, okay, when I'm in shock, this is what my body does. And this was a different type of shock. My body did different things that I did not know. So it changes every time. But if you already have the tools, I think there's a base level. But some people don't necessarily have that. And what I've noticed too is they fixate on like I said, the what ifs of, well, what if he had done this, or what if they had done that, or what if maybe I'd done this, like would it be different? And every when I realized what happened, I went through like his route, and I asked this coach to explain everything to me because they can go through and they can even see when they're pedaling, right? So I said, explain every step of the way. Did he know? They have the heart rate monitors, and so I'm lucky in that case where, not that it made it better, but I actually do think it made it better where technology helped, right? And not everybody gets that. So I have a lot more answers than I think most people do when somebody dies, especially in that way. But I do think that it helps to not fixate on the what ifs, because he could have taken a turn. What if he had done a 2-hour ride instead? What if he had decided not to do a bike ride? What if he had decided to come with me on this trip? And there's so many variables to it that there's no winning, right? There's no scenario where that person doesn't make the decision, because at the end of the day, I think the part that made me mad, and I know it made his sister mad too, is the comments online towards cyclists that get hit are so aggressively negative and hostile versus if you've been walking and got hit. Because that's another thing that actually happened. So before I moved to North Carolina, I was on a patio and a car hit, and the guy was on drugs and all these things. But like you could literally be sitting on a patio or be walking on a sidewalk. But specifically for cyclists, people hate them. So there was a lot of focus on why was he riding at night? Why was he doing this? And he had a camera, he had the lights. It's actually very crazy. So I think, just trying to focus on literally anything except the what ifs, because I've seen people go through the rabbit hole with that. And I think it makes it so much worse than the situation that's already bad.
Yeah, well, I think again, too, it's just a word that keeps popping in my mind, just protecting yourself, protecting your own emotions, your own mindset. These are all things you need to do. Again, I don't know what it's like to be in your shoes or to feel like what you feel. I would never pretend to say, "Oh, I know exactly what you mean." But I also think it's just so important to protect ourselves and do what is best for us. If you want to say, "I'm a widow," you say that. Like, there should be nobody that tells you you can't say that. And if you want to do different types of activities, use tools that you've put into your tool belt over the years to get through all of this, then you need to do that to protect yourself. And if you do the what ifs, does that really benefit you at the end of the day, or does it just make you feel worse? And we have no idea what the future brings, which is another reason we're doing this podcast. You just don't know what tomorrow brings. Anything can turn on a dime. So hopefully all of you as listeners have learned a lot about that throughout listening to the podcast, but especially after today's episode, you really don't know what the future brings. You don't know what tomorrow is. I mean, obviously you can plan ahead. You can plan your Italy trip because you need to make these things in advance, but it's also very important to just understand that anything can change on a whim. So I just really appreciate you sharing your very difficult story and the very difficult path that you're on. I'm really sorry that you have to go through what you're going through. Um, I respect you so much for how you seem to be handling it, for going back to work, for getting into your routine, for again using those tools that you've had to use in the past, and relying on your village, your people. So
Yeah.
I pray that you can continue to do that and you continue to feel the love around you. I'm really really sorry that you had to go through all of this at the young age and just when you're starting your life out, but you sharing your story with others is very powerful. So hopefully you continue to do that and keep sharing your beautiful memory of Blaze too. I definitely was glad we got to hear about him.
Yeah. I just had two final thoughts of if you know somebody who's grieving, do not ask them how they're doing because that was the most overwhelming thing. And I know it comes from a good place, but now I know my friends learned they're like, you just ignore me when we ask that. And when I started back at work, I said, please don't ask me how I'm doing. That's a really stupid question. And yeah, so think of anything else. And also, instead of sending flowers, you can send an Uber Eats gift card through the app. And that is so much better than flowers that are going to die. So, two big things. I will never send anyone flowers ever again when somebody dies.
That is really great advice. I love that. But yeah, I've learned too. Obviously, we've had different guests. Some have talked about grief, some have talked about medical diagnoses, and I've just learned like, yeah, the best thing is to say, "Hey, I'm here. If you need me, thinking about you, I'm praying for you." Like if you are really praying for them, you could say that.
But it is such an overwhelming question when 20 people are all texting you at the exact same time asking that question.
Yes, yeah, definitely. That is really good advice. And we need to learn that because we need to be able to, we didn't go through it. Our friend went through it. So we should have the same head, the level head on our shoulders. We should think before we speak. So that is really good advice. I will say as my final thought that you did say, oh, things could be worse. Not that you were saying
Yeah, I'm
that's how
done
you feel,
saying that now.
but people say that. And yeah, it's all relative. No one fully knows how you feel. No one can say that they've been in your shoes. No one really knows how they would react. I don't like that when people are like, "Oh, I would have done this. I would have done that." You have absolutely no idea what you would have done. So, yeah, just having empathy, being kind toward the person that you're around, and just being a shoulder to cry on, a person to call, sending food,
Yeah.
sending the gift card. Like, there's a lot more things that you can do to not understand what the person's going through, but to just be there for them.
I also think that grief I think people get a lot of excuses of, oh, well, they're grieving, so they're acting XYZ way. And yeah, like you're gonna do some weird things for sure and maybe behave in a weird way, but I do think that it brings out the true person to an extent, despite some of the weird stuff, right? Because everybody copes differently. But like if you're just being super wild and mean, or you see people react in a different way, I think it really just brings out the true core of people. So you can also maybe look at that and say, okay, maybe I shouldn't excuse that. Or, okay, maybe that is how they are, right? Like, you just never know.
Right, right. That's really good thought. Well, Haley, thank you so much for sharing your story. And again, I feel like there are listeners that not that they've maybe been through exactly what you've been through, but just to know they're not alone in things that they're going through too. I think these stories are all really important and the reason why I wanted to do this podcast. So thank you for your time and for being so open with us and sharing all of your thoughts and all of your real advice. I truly appreciate you being a guest.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Thank you for joining me for the Show Me the Way podcast. I truly appreciate you tuning in to today's episode about overcoming adversity and finding your path. I hope it brought you new insights, empowered you with perspective, and inspired you to find joy in your journey. If this episode touched your heart, don't forget to leave a quick review as it will help us reach and motivate more people. Until next time, keep seeking the light and showing the way.